remember that they're changing my voice. A very key part of my story is that I'm the only one who's giving good life advice. And also law enforcement, mental health, the government, the intelligence apparatus, the military, you name it, the churches, mosques, synagogues, every group you can think of has permanently discredited themselves to the wise man. The wise man wouldn't rely on their judgment to determine what to do with somebody, for example, who's acting in a way that's odd on the street. Between them not being very smart, not being very insightful, between them having ulterior motives, between them collaborating with the state and the masses of law enforcement officials not coming forward and saying, hey, yeah, gang stalking is taking place. They didn't do that. The American people, as the stated argument of law enforcement and the government, relied on law enforcement to have the integrity to enforce the Constitution before trying to enforce social orders and their sexual agendas and other things that they're prioritizing. They refuse to do that. And as we see the historical abuse of psychiatry, the political abuse by white supremacist, radical, kind of crazy, psychotic Jews, I'm not saying all Jews are that way, but the ones who are, regardless of what percentage of the Jews they are, and LGBT people, right? With their ulterior motives and how they were able to remove homosexuality off the list of the mental illness. It was put on there for political reasons and was removed for political reasons, and they never had a sound argument for its removal. They didn't have a perfect argument to put it there in the first place, but they had a pretty good argument. It had to do with their behavior, like the gay parades and the things that gays are known for, made it so that we saw symptoms that there's something wrong with them. No offense to anybody, but we didn't see a lot of reason to say, hey, well, that's just this guy or that guy. We saw it becoming the popular culture. So when you see that people take on a certain state of mind, like a sexual orientation state of mind, what have you, based state of mind, and they start to come into the cultures, that we see that, that we can now look at it and say, what does that state of mind come with? If it comes with unfocused behavior, with high rates of fixation, okay, what have you, then we start to have to ask ourselves, is it a mental illness? But did it cross that line, okay, where we can say definitively it is or not? Well, that's not what this video is about, okay, believe it or not. This video is about the fact that law enforcement and mental health have been discredited. And it's also about me having to leave my home on Monday, a decision I made myself. So what had happened is I decided that, enough is enough, and I'd taken enough disrespect from my brother specifically. My mother kind of recklessly moves. My father's very sick, and he's kind of more naturally inclined to be considerate than my mother or my brother, who's the most like my mother. However, I don't care if she's white or whatever, okay? I love my mother. I don't, I'm not racist against her. It just happens to be how it is, right? My older brother's shaped more like she is than me, my little brother and I. And he has more of her traits in terms of an inability to kind of masterfully wrap his mind around the situation in terms of life issues, though they're both very scholarly people, and so I know firsthand that there's a difference between being book smart and being life smart, but they're not very perceptive when it comes to how to maneuver in life situations, okay? And so it is with kind of the government in general. In fact, if we look at racial qualities of people, okay, you say there's a reason why black people are called soul brothers, maybe Native Americans and Hispanics and Asians are good at art. There's various kind of, generally speaking, as groups on spectrum, what have you, there's various kinds of things that are associated with different groups, right? And whites, Jews, and LGBT, okay, after years of research and objective facts and going through the facts, as groups, their spectrum doesn't go there very high up there when it comes to sound insight and having the qualities of a good leader, okay? Now, is this going to stop them from insisting on being in charge after my flesh is gone, while I'm here, you name it? Okay, no, they're going to keep doing that. But it's important to note so you can make your life decision. No offense to whites, Jews, and LGBT people, right? This is part of the story, and to understand what's happening here, I have to help you understand these things so you can see what happened and not act like an immature person. So if we were going to move forward as a mature adult, okay, as a society of mature adults, and we were to look at the mental health issues that are very much They're very real and everywhere. And mental health doesn't have the disorders nailed, right? I've been saying this for years. They have no viable counterargument. They don't have a valid diagnostic test still. And they don't truly understand what causes mental illnesses, what the nature of them are, where to draw the line when it comes to, hospitalization, involuntary, hospitalization. They don't understand these things. Okay? And even if they did, they are so inclined to just roll with the state. These aren't people who die for what they believe. They're not. These are people who, if they die for something, it's their complex, right, kind of thing. And they insist on their social club's agenda, their political group's agenda, the government. Some are CIA assets. I imagine most of them are some kind of intelligence asset by now. Okay? It's just how things work. There's this massive network of informants in the streets, and there's a massive network of assets for intelligence agencies and institutions. It's just how it is. And anyone who's worked with intelligence at all, who has seen that part of it to any significant degree, must be aware of that. I can't imagine that they're not. But it's been made clear to me definitively. Okay, and I see the objective facts. They're facts. That is the case. That's a fact. So, as we look at this thing, we know the government's corrupt, and we know that people lack moral worth. And can we really trust them with, sending them to people to the hospital on a whim, basically? Okay, because they're acting up a little bit. Maybe they're yelling at the park. Maybe, they got in a fight with their wife. Maybe they said they want to hurt somebody or something. They go straight to the hospital on the whim of a police officer. Sometimes they let it go, and they also have been proven to be racist. If it's a white person, they're likely to say, well, it's understandable. He's having a bad day. If it's a black person, they're likely to say, so to speak, that person's a threat. So there's all kinds of reasons why it's illogical, right? There's favoring females. There's all kinds of reasons why I'm right about this. The reasons are like the grains of sand on the beach and beyond. So what had happened today, and I think, again, this is my story, why it's still fresh in my mind. And we've had arguments before that were significant. They caused the police to come and so on and so forth. Today was nowhere near that, but it was just the straw that broke the camel's back, but it was more significant than a straw. So basically what happened is, we're talking about issues in the house, and people are a bit stressed out because of the PSYOP and the financial sabotage. And because I kind of am more prudent, I have more money, at least as the stated argument of my family, who could be lying for the state, right? I have more money than everyone else does. And I've been telling them for years, I said, shut down your operation. Don't trust the government and their network to bring you funding, so on and so forth. Okay? And so, you got to understand that my father describes my brother as contentious, right? As highly argumentative. He does not describe me that way. He would describe me as considerate, okay, as having fits of anger over issues that he doesn't quite understand because he's hard of hearing and so on and so forth. But what he sees, that I'm very considerate in our interactions, okay, very helpful, very organized, and that sometimes I walk out of the room and start, yelling in frustration. And that has to do with being covertly drugged and fumed, and I have 23 witnesses on record. You see, those are objective facts. And as you put them together, the logical conclusion is that there's nothing wrong with me because of the 23 witnesses on top of my insightful testimony, which goes far beyond the average person when they explain what's going on with them. And psychiatrists and psychologists and law enforcement, they're supposed to pick up on that right away. Okay. So when we look at what happened today, they're talking about, they got it, they were installing a check of money, right? So, and that my mom wanted to take it to a bank in Morgan Hill, there in San Jose, and he wanted to cash it. And so she kind of rolled her eyes and said, okay, we're going to cash it instead. It cost them $20 to cash. And again, I don't give a shit about that $20. That's not what this is about, okay? I said, well, and he acted like it was smart, and he likes to act like people are not talking sense, and he is, over petty ass shit, and to be very argumentative right away. He's like, she's like, oh, I want to bring it to Morgan Hill, da 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 da. And I said, just cash it right here. Boom. So he took the cash to the bank. He acted like it was smart, right? And I said, very calmly, I said, okay, so, what did you need the money for that, was worth paying the $20? Because my mom doesn't like me, when she gives me the card to withdraw money for her, she doesn't like me to go to a different bank if the bank teller's shut down. There's not too many banks in Morgan Hill, so if I can't go to her bank, that she doesn't want me to go to a different bank and pay the $3, $5 fee or whatever it is, right? So I'm getting that right away, and he usually doesn't do things like that with her, and he's quick to jump to conclusions, and he's very argumentative, and he's having a bad time in his life, but that's like his whole life. His whole life, he wasn't doing good. And again, I'm not talking shit about him. Okay, shout out to my older brother, what have you. Okay. I love you within the boundaries of righteousness, as much as a righteous person should love someone who's rebelling against God, who's running a sop on his own brother, what have you. But he snapped at me, right? I'm kind of losing my train of thought here. I'm being fumed a little bit here, and changing my speech patterns, my voice. Quite often after I start making the video, they time it so that, my speech pattern changes within a couple minutes or so. But so he lashed out at me. He said, "Fuck do you think?" Right? And this was common speech. So, at some point I walk outside. Okay, and I should explain this more in my stories so a lot of people will relate to it. Okay, so when somebody like offends you, sometimes you'll go to your car and be like, "Man, what the fuck, man?" And you'll kind of vent, right? That's very common. I've had police officers tell me that they do the same thing. Okay, and so I go outside and I start, I get mad and I start, blaming the people who are to blame, right? The rich whites, rich Jews, rich LGBT people and their social clubs and the military, and etc. who are running the PSYOP. And I highlight that I believe, and I know for sure it's an objective fact, that with a true universal scale, moral scale, virtue means man, okay, that I'm superior to them. And I say it in a way to get even and what have you, and so on and so forth. And I go back in and I'm thinking, I'm like, I say out loud, because the government quite often, the government makes it clear to me that they hear what I say and they bring it up later at various times, okay? So I say, I'm going to leave on Monday no matter what now. At first it was a matter of the money, and I had to, there's a long story why that is. I'm not a materialistic person. It has to do with my ability to move around. It has to do with being fumed in the same place in Morgan Hill. It has to do with how much money it costs to take off, and I don't want to have to help my family out with more than a certain amount of money. And then there's the martial art challenge to consider, $60,000 if I don't get compensated, okay? And it's at like $10 million now or something. If I do get compensated by the government, which they're not man enough to do in a timely fashion, that's pretty obvious. I'm going to be 43 years old soon, so I have to consider age, damage to the brain, damage to the body, financial considerations, females shunning me when Christ is the bridegroom, which is a form of mocking God. So if they keep shunning me consistently, okay, I've got to take off and step it up on people, okay, in a way that's peaceful and so on and so forth. Okay. So, and when I mean take off, I mean literally leave the house. Okay. So anyway, like I was saying, I go out and and then as I'm walking back inside, because I'm planning to leave like I usually do in the morning, I go up to the bathroom upstairs. I come back downstairs. I have to grab my socks, which is by where he's standing in the kitchen. Okay, no, excuse me. I got the order. Earlier I forgot. Okay, as I'm coming inside. That happened later. So I go inside. I go up to the bathroom. Then I come back down, and then he's in the kitchen, right? And I just went to the bathroom to just cool off, whatever. You just think for a second. And, my rooms are fumed, so I can't stand in there. So I went back downstairs, and then I say to him, while I'm kind of charged up a little bit, even though at the time I was like, I'm going to say it calmly, but I came out a little bit more harsh than I wanted to. I said, I don't appreciate you talking to me with a hostile tone. And I don't want to argue about it. And I'm full of adrenaline. I've been fumed. I feel the drugs changing the way I feel. And it's distinct from, brain seizures or bipolar disorder. I study people who have those issues, okay? Periodically, I go back to that as part of my research. That's not what I was experiencing. I'm not, there's no psychosis or schizophrenia, okay? There's no bipolar disorder, no temporal lobe seizures, none of this stuff, right? Okay? It was clearly the results of covert drugging. And I've talked to psychologists and mental health people about this, and some of the government themselves, some people working from the government have admitted that to me. That's an objective fact. Okay, once they've gone there, it's stupid to assume it's something else. That's done with. Okay, that argument is settled, as I predicted the whole time, mind you. So I basically said to him, he kind of looks at me confused, okay? He's so used to being argumentative that he's like, man, what the fuck are you talking about with his look? He doesn't say anything. He just looks at me like, huh? And then so I go upstairs to come back down, grab my socks, and I leave. And then eventually, you know, maybe an hour later or something, I wind up here by Safeway in Morgan Hill. So, you know, that was, you know, back in the day when we had an argument over, you know, some other issue, and he grabbed me and I dropped the chicken wing story, and the police came and everything. Okay, it's a similar series of events. Okay, it has to do with communication, has to do with the class of personality and cultures. I also wanted to talk about that, right? So some people are more like the samurai's wife, but there's cultural, you know, just because your temperament and your thinking and your lifestyle is more like mine doesn't mean we're a good match or what have you. But we might do better living in the same area. So, for example, if I lived in an area with nothing but respecting Asians and other people who are very who give you respectful Asians, and other people with that kind of mentality, okay, that I would do well and I'd hardly ever be upset. I'd have a certain organization, I'd have a wife, what have you. So we can see that Western culture is the problem, and it's specifically, bear with me, specifically where we have the masses of white privileged people who put on one act in public and behind the scenes plot with you. That's like number one problem. There's Jews who act like there's LGBT people who fixate on the gay agenda and who harass people. There's a lot of things like this that comes together to create a frustrating environment for certain personality types that are much more mature than these other people are. They have much more mental clarity. They don't feel the need to cheat people. Okay, at least not to the degree that these people do. I don't feel the need at all myself, but some people, it's either close to nothing or it's a little bit or something. Or these other people are fanatically fixating on cheating people and abusing people. That's why I say we need a region argument. I don't feel the need to change people's voices and images in their pictures, in their videos. These people do. They've changed all my pictures, all my video looks. And it's not very hard in 2024 to have a program, and it's been several years since they've done that, mind you, to have a program that does it, to rig the hardware, to have software. It's a walk in the park. I'd say the average college student who's second year into their software engineering program could do that. Okay, the average one. It's not very hard. They take the time to figure out, what do I need to do this, and they could do that. So imagine the people that work for Google, okay, and the people that work for the FBI, what have you. That was not a problem. Between them and AI, not a problem. And they did just that. And I'm sure you've noticed it in elsewhere as well. But a lot of you, if not all of you, are too scared to man up and say, yes, that's what's going on. And you've taken on a different conception of what it means to be a man than virtue means man. Okay, so you have a non-virtuous conception. You have a local cultural conception. Whether you're in Alaska or in Somalia or in China, you've taken on a different conception. That's part of your problems, by the way. And again, I'm not saying this to bash anybody. I hope you people scramble to do the right thing before it's too late. But this is part of the story. You see how all these things connect to that issue that happened and the reason why I'm leaving on Monday, regardless if the money comes or not. And they've been dangling money over my family in regards to their cancer research and and cures, well, they're not entire cures from what I gather. I don't have all the information on that. But it has to do with Parkinson's, malaria, cancer, what have you. Okay, and this stuff has been in publications and all that. Lots of people know about this stuff, okay? So they've been saying, hey, we're going to fund you if, okay? And we're going to do this if. And I'm not supposed to talk too much about the stuff, but the names of the things also corroborate. They're also part of how they're communicating, okay? Somewhere, somehow, maybe the CIA doesn't appreciate that, but I think that we've come to a point where it's clear that this should be said and publicly. I do not work for the CIA. I am not a CIA asset. I would never be. I don't work for the government. I don't work for the church or anything. I never have. I've always been somebody who puts God first. I've only had one other job other than working for my parents in my life, and it was a temp job. Okay. And I've been working for my parents for many, many years now, for the medical company and otherwise. Okay. And so, I don't even have a fucking boss. That's part of why I'm able to kind of say what I want in this very censorship-based society. This society is not centered around freedom. It's centered around governing class pettiness. And censorship is a huge part of it. I go as far as say it's a core part of it. Not only are you censored on the internet, we see cancel culture and so on and so forth. And some people, by the way, argue that cancel culture magically doesn't exist. Everyone knows it exists. Okay. Just like everyone knows, almost everyone, I'd imagine, knows that gang stalking exists. Okay. So it's censored around, hey, you can't say that. You can't do that. And it's above and beyond the law. And it's above and beyond social, being polite or something. They just go the distance to silence and stifle people and stifle dissent. Okay. So keep in mind that psychiatrists aren't the only ones who can somewhat diagnose symptoms of mental illness. So do you think that what I've been saying shows high levels of disorganized thinking and disorganized speech? Does it show hallucination or false beliefs, or is it based on objective facts? While somebody, in this case me, is saying that if you have a viable counter argument, please present it. Is this person looking for a second opinion? Please, if you have a second opinion, please put in the comments. If you have a viable counter argument, please present it. But if you're going to come at me with that government shit that everyone knows is government bullshit that's more obvious than a politician saying a lie, I'm not going to accept that as sound advice. If I'm wrong about something, it's almost certainly a minor detail, okay, but I'd love to hear it. If you think I'm wrong about a major detail or idea, please, by all means, weigh in. People who are mentally ill, they don't have a logical process for doing those things when they're mentally ill in a way that prevents them from seeing it in themselves. The vast majority of people who are mentally ill, they know that there's something wrong with them, and that's how it goes. The small percentage that doesn't know that there's something wrong with them, okay, when we're talking about the people who are being treated by psychiatrists, what have you, okay, or people think that they should be treated, the small percentage of them, okay, that don't know are usually bat shit fucking crazy. They don't make distinctions like I just made. They are fucking nuts. They think they're Napoleon, what have you. They think aliens are out to get them. They're batshit. Schizophrenia is the most severe mental illness. And some of these people, some of these psychiatrists want you to believe that the most sane person that ever lived is magically, fucking miraculously schizophrenic. That is crazy. Even when I make statements that seem like these very potent statements, that some racist might argue is delusions of grandeur. Okay? If Michael Jordan, for example, wasn't commonly acknowledged as one of the greatest basketball players ever, some racists would argue he has delusions of grandeur. If people didn't know that it's logical for a black person to be a brain surgeon's son, some people might argue that that's a delusion of grandeur. I argue that the Bible's the miracles in the Bible are figurative, which is a much more logical and objective way to look at the Bible. When we look at the comparisons and the models of lifestyles, of message, of morals, between figurative miracles or literal miracles, okay, that people are supposed to believe is true and take as proof that God exists and that Jesus died for your sins and so on and so forth. That doesn't make sense. Especially when we look at how disingenuous Romans are and how often the Jewish people contradict each other, accuse each other of being liars, what have you. We look at the Old Testament where they go on and on about the Jews are lying. They're lying, they're lying, they're lying, they're lying. So you're supposed to believe the Romans, who everyone knows lied left and right, okay, for the pettiest reasons possible. And the Jews, who in their own book are accused of being liars by the few people who aren't lying in their books, like Isaiah the prophet, time and time again. And that's how they define themselves relative to the Torah, which is the Old Testament in the Bible. Pretty straightforward. That is not objective thinking. What I am doing is objective thinking. It is logical thinking. It is the sound conclusion versus just wishful thinking and mere human rules, customs, and traditions. So as we look at this thing, we've got to see that I'm in the right, and you just can't let people abuse you left and right in your family or not when you're God's son. You've got to say, hey, what you're doing is now crossed over into the realm of insulting God, and I can't allow that. So for better or worse, no matter how much it's going to cost me, I'm taking off. And I put myself at more at risk of being killed by the government in ways of plausible deniability. They've been known to kill people in a way that makes it so it looks like suicide, a car accident, you name it. And somebody's very careful, mind you. Now, if you think that what I've said is alarming, or you think it's crazy, or you think it's wrong, I command you in the name of God to put in the comments. I'm not just asking for your opinion. I'm commanding you as Christ. Okay? How can they then turn around and say he's crazy, or he's a risk to himself or others? You people are attempting to terrorize me, and you're poisoning me and causing me physical harm. You are terrorists by definition. And I am trying to reason with everybody, including law enforcement, right now, by definition, objectively. Thank you. So I noticed that they have made some of this video sound corny. They have a way to edit the way it sounds before it is even uploaded. Be it software, be it the fumes in the air having some kind of electromagnetic characteristics, or whatever the case may be. I'm not the expert on that sort of thing. But I've clearly noticed that it sounds different than I sound. And keep in mind, I've been making videos for many years. I basically know how I sound when I, make a video. And I listen to how it sounds. It's nearly identical. But in recent years, there's been a serious discrepancy. And other people have noticed that as well.